If you could go back in time, you could either vote for Kamala Harris or Donald Trump. Who would you vote for?
Trump.
Okay, why so?
In that dichotomy, I see that we've gotten to a time where our politicians need business leadership, and our foreign adversaries have infiltrated a lot of our politicians on the left and the right. And I feel like we've kind of swung so far left and so far right where more Americans are moderate than what people think. And Donald Trump, his policies are free market capitalist policies that kind of swing back to how America was founded. And if, again, if I had to choose one versus the other, I think that on a global scale, Trump was more respected than Kamala.
So that's just not true. If you actually look at like public confidence ratings for different countries, Kamala Harris and Joe Biden had significantly higher confidence ratings on a global stage comparative to Donald Trump. There's only a few countries specifically that you'd be able to point to where it was higher for Donald Trump comparative to any Democrat, like literally any Democrat. Secondly, like the idea that like foreign countries having a control over like the left is not unique to the left. Like obviously there are foreign countries that have control over both sides, and some influence over both sides. It's not total or complete control, but that's true to some degree. And with Trump, I think that's very, very true because I mean, he took a $400 million jet from Qatar. I mean, he
Mhm.
specifically has taken plenty of money from Israel. He's engaged with Israel and said that he's okay with them taking a one-state solution in the context of Israel and Palestine, which is literally and then annexing of the land. So it seemingly like there's a huge level of influence that other countries have over the United States. I could also point to like Putin, right? How he thought that he could get a deal with Putin done, but there wasn't actually any deal that he could get done, and Putin just lied in order to be able to maintain more power in Ukraine, which is clearly what he did
Mhm.
because Donald Trump pulled away funding, and then they went in as hard as they possibly could, and then Trump brought back the funding, and then we're at less funding than we were prior, less defense of Ukraine than we were prior. We would have been in a better position to defend Ukraine if we never got rid of it.
Well, let's go back to the pre Biden agenda. When Trump helped get the Abraham Accords in place, I feel like that helped stabilize some of the Middle East. And when Iran was running out of money, I don't think that they would have been in a position to fund. Now, I agree with you in the sense that I don't like what's going on in Israel and Gaza. I feel like the Mossad has infiltrated a majority of our own political cabinets where it's hard to believe what's real and what's not. And we've come to a time where, like, look at the Gaza Riviera plans. I don't think anybody on the right or the left has a solution to help get out of that other than the US starting to break away with Israel. I mean, look at the 250 legislatures that just went over there. That they're in no means trying to stop that war or that. So,
Yeah, like I
I
mean,
mean,
I hold that
I agree with
accountable
you
in
on
terms
that.
of both sides. That's something that I think needs to
Yeah.
be rid from our politics is that level of influence that foreign countries will have over our politics. I think that's a really bad thing in of itself. I don't think the Abraham Accords led to better conditions. I think the lack of recognition for a Palestinian state definitely increased the likelihood of conflict in the long run. And then to go back kind of originally to the point that you were making about business leadership, I don't think Donald Trump's specific business leadership would be uniquely good insofar as that we would say he'd be a good candidate for president. And I also don't think just being a business leader at all would be really relevant towards like being a good president because it relies more on like economics understanding, right? Within the context of how it's going to affect the entire economy from a federal perspective, rather than just like a specific business. Because they know what's profitable for a certain business, that they could be good at that, but that doesn't mean that they're good at running the country in a manner in which is not based on profit and rather is based upon like what's best for the people.
Hmm. Do you think that the commander in chief or the head of the executive branch needs to hold some form of conservatism in their political ideology?
Well, I don't know what you mean by conservative, some form of conservatism. Like I'm not a conservative, so I wouldn't advocate that they should be conservative. But
I
like
mean, I'd probably be a 1960s liberal. I am social. I'm fiscally conservative and socially liberal. But where you feel we are today, like if we had another 4 years of Joe Biden, what would have been different with Kamala as president? Do you feel like we would have sustained a lot of those policies and would have kind of swung further left if Kamala were president?
Yeah, obviously, I think that there would be an Overton window shift to the left if Kamala were president. I think it would be better conditions for the everyday average person. I think that we would have clearly had, not the horrible jobs report numbers that we saw due to the Donald Trump tariffs. We wouldn't have had increase in prices specifically through inflation, going up since April up to 2.9%, trending up from 2.3%. Because of Donald Trump's tariffs, which then puts the Fed in a situation where they can't reduce interest rates as much. But now, because the jobs report was so bad, they're risking increasing inflation even to a greater extent because they need to stimulate the economy to ensure that there are like more jobs that are created, so that we don't have like potentially stagflation.
Yeah, and I think the stagflation, hyperinflationary risk is certainly there, especially with the amount of debt that we're carrying. But you've got to realize also that we're kind of at a turning point where, as AI gets implemented into the American economy, I don't envision job reports to continue to go up and up and up as time goes on. We're at a place where we're going to need prompt engineers, and recursive learning with AI is only getting a lot stronger. And therefore, I think with Trump's tariffs policies, what he's looking for as he's a pro crypto, pro blockchain administration, he all he wants is trade reciprocity. And there was such an imbalance to where production in America would never have been sustainable. And I think that's where a lot of this outside investment, you mentioned the $400 million from Qatar, there are trillions of dollars being put into infrastructure in the form of data centers inside the US so that we can have a global impact on artificial intelligence now that quantum computing is backing it. And I don't think people realize, Parker, and I agree with you a lot of stuff, but I love debating some points, and I'd love to debate the abortion piece here momentarily. But I think that with blockchain technology, I mean, the World Economic Forum in 2021 anticipated that $867 trillion of business revenue was going to get disrupted by blockchain technology. Knowing that that's coming, knowing that there's a lot of companies like Salesforce and Zoom, and I'd say Fortune 500 companies that are built on things that AI can do, and so therefore they can't provide additional value moving forward. Part of the reason why they needed tariffs to find, or they used tariffs as a weapon to create trade reciprocity with other nations, so that in the form of AI data centers, we can, we can use AI in a way to where we can help other countries, but as long as they're helping us in the same form, I think that's the only way that we can get our national debt taken care of. And we're going to use crypto to help with that too. I don't disagree wholeheartedly with Russia. Now, I just threw out a lot of things. I'm happy to debate any of those, but the abortion ones I'd love to get your impact on as well.
Yeah, so I mean, I'd love to address this first, and then we can move on to that. So there's a few things. So it seems like you're saying that there's going to be a trend down in the amount of jobs that are created specifically due to AI. I don't think that change would have happened like as quick as it did, right? If it were actually AI, this is because of Donald Trump's tariffs. And then if AI is going to then be in a place in the United States, especially to be able to produce goods rather than workers, well, then wouldn't we actually expect that if we were to impose tariffs, that instead of those jobs going to American workers and domestic manufacturers, it would be actually AI that would be doing it?
I think we're trending in that, and you're probably right. I think there's got to be a lagging indicator on that jobs report when it comes to AI implementation. But I mean, it's coming. I work in finance. I'm seeing where the money is trending towards. It's going into industrial data centers. It's going into recursive learning. There's a lot more mergers and acquisitions that are happening, and
Before we
layoffs.
do, let me clarify my question.
Yeah,
Right,
yeah.
you're saying that AI is going to do it, is going to take over a lot of the jobs. That's why we're seeing a reduction in the amount of new jobs that are being added. So if there was a tariff being implemented, wouldn't all of those jobs just go mostly to like jobs that would be fulfilled by AI rather than U.S. workers?
I would consider tariffs and job creation to be mutually exclusive. I mean, a tariff is really just creating a trade balance or trade reciprocity. So let's just use a basic example. If I was living in Canada the last year, right, and it's very, I'd say a lot further left than the U.S. In terms of where the policies are, and I'd be happy to chat about that. But if Trump puts on a tariff into Canada, I mean, right now Canada's what, 2% of our GDP, but we're 20% of their GDP. And so if you find trade reciprocity, you're going to find that Canada's economy is going to suffer and it's not really going to affect ours. But there's a lot of goods that we bring in from Canada that ultimately we could make in the US ourselves. I think if it all depends on what type of country we want to be moving forward. And I feel like trade balance where we can work with Canada and provide, equal help to them that they provide equal help to the US. I think that's only leading in the right direction. But I do agree with you that that's going to hurt the jobs report. But I think that as time moves forward, there's going to be more jobs available in the US, as well as working to eliminate some of the national debt. Because when you when you have one person who goes, from a job to unemployment, they are now sucking, let's say, 30 to 50K from the government. You get that one person a job, they are now potentially adding 10 to 20K in taxes from the government. And so in the meantime, yes, the trade imbalance with the tariffs, like that's going to find some form of balance. But when it does, there'll be more money invested in the US, more businesses buying locally. And when businesses buy locally, that significantly increases the taxation of the economy. When we buy goods from China, all our money's just going overseas and all the jobs are done over there. If we take that and buy locally, that state's getting business taxes. Those workers are paying FICA. Those workers are paying taxes. And so finding a trade imbalance locally at home is really the only avenue we have towards solving some of the national debt. Yes, it's going to hurt jobs in the short term.
Actually, it doesn't help you with the national debt. The issue is that trade imbalance, in terms of there being a trade deficit, has nothing to do with the national debt at all. Right?
Wait, tell me more.
Yeah, trade deficits have nothing to do with the national debt at all. The trade deficits are about the difference between exports and imports, right, when engaging in trade with a different country. So the idea of a trade imbalance leading to our national debt is definitely wrong. And then if you want to look at the overall perspective, which candidate leads to a greater level of debt signed into law, it would actually be Trump. The Committee for Responsible Federal Budget, a nonpartisan committee from the federal government, did an analysis on this and indicated that there was $4 trillion more debt-related spending signed into law by the Trump administration comparative to the Biden-Harris administration, and then under the first term. And for the second term, the campaign plans Harris's administration versus Trump's administration, even taking into account the revenue from the tariffs, indicated that Harris's campaign plans would add $4 trillion less on a central estimate than Trump's plans.
Do you feel like it's not only just the amount of national debt, but it's truly the debt to GDP ratio? I mean, Trump really helps raise the GDP in a positive way to where he can take on more debt to invest in areas to eventually lower that debt.
GDP is growing at a slower rate since Trump got in office. And there wasn't actually like a change in trend from his first term to like Biden's first term. Even if you want to look at real GDP, it's basically the exact same. But since Trump's got in office and imposed the tariffs, it's definitely negatively impacted GDP. And secondly, like you did also say that tariffs and job creation are mutually exclusive, and then argued right after that tariffs in the long run would create jobs. So do you think that they're still mutually exclusive in the long run?
So they're mutually exclusive in the short run, but they're dependent on each other in the long run. Because so the idea is that, let's say U.S. companies are buying all their steel in China. And then all of a sudden, Trump puts on a huge tariff for Chinese steel. And American companies say, wow, I can actually buy local American steel now because the prices are the same. And as that local American steel company now hires more individuals, and these other businesses inside the US buy from the local American business, that increases the amount of tax revenue that that state and federal level will receive, as well as the amount of jobs that are created for that company.
A few things for
Yep.
this. Higher
Sure.
costs for goods for consumers. Secondly, it's also more costly in terms of the domestic manufacturing process. If you put a tariff on everything from around the world, manufacturers in the United States that rely on aspects of the production process that come from countries around the world, their cost of production will go up. That's why we've seen real manufacturing investment decline since Trump got in office. And you're saying this is just in the short term, it's not going to happen in the long run, but there's not really much of an incentive for them to come in the long run because it's a tariff through an executive action. It's not through the legislative branch, meaning that it's less permanent in the long run and that the next president can just come in and override it. And likely it would because of the disastrous effects of it.
Do you see a Democrat taking the White House in 2028?
Yeah,
Like, what do you see as the, like, who?
I don't know. But I see it trending towards Democrats because the reason why Trump got elected is because people attributed inflation to the incumbent president. They thought Trump was going to make it better in terms of that. He clearly didn't. He's made it worse. So he's losing all of his approval rating in terms of the economy. If you look at his approval rating in terms of his economic policy, it is in the gutter. It is horrible right now. And it's because there's essentially no good arguments for his position, right? From an economic standpoint, he's not more fiscally responsible. He's not creating more jobs. He's not creating better economic conditions. He's not lowering prices. Um, there's really nothing that he's brought to the economy that is beneficial for the everyday average working American. I mean, real manufacturing investment was massively increasing under the Biden-Harris administration. They actually had policy to address it. The infrastructure bill, the bipartisan infrastructure bill, the Chips and Science Act, the Inflation Reduction Act. Those were different policies that invested in domestic manufacturing in the United States to actually make it cheaper, right, to produce in the United States, then incentivize people to buy from American-made goods to show them that they can compete in the market rather than forcing that competition for American firms that are not ready for that competition, right, and actually making it more expensive for them to manufacture in the United States. So I don't think tariffs, especially on a universal basis, would be beneficial at increasing manufacturing. Could targeted tariffs in certain industries be effective for increasing domestic manufacturing? Absolutely. But it would have to be
Yeah.
in that context. And it would have to be through
And
legislative action.
And I agree. In that context, yes. I see tariffs more as a weapon to create trade reciprocity so that prices become fair and local communities around the country, especially in the Rust Belt, they can compete with foreign businesses. And it's not so much that you're right. Like we don't want to throw tariffs on the entire world in order to destabilize the level of inflation that could occur inside the US as a result. But by having some form of competition, it is the opposite of free market. So it does seem a bit oxymoronic in that, but I do feel that the pulse on the American economy, like you mentioned, when you meet with a client and they're talking about the couple $100,000 in their 401k, they're more bullish now than they were before. And I don't know, those polls or pulses on the economy saying that, the average American is not feeling more confident about their country's standing and their paycheck going further under Trump.
No, it's
It's just
actually
hard
whether or
to.
not they approve of the government's plans or the Trump's administration's plans on the economy. And he just has a very low approval rating. His approval rating was actually above 50% for the economy, and then now it's like 20 something percent. So it's seen a massive decline.
Mhm.
So I mean, and then also you said prices become more fair. For who? The American producers? I don't even know if that would be true. There's also other things we need to take into account. When it is the case that we place tariffs in other countries, they place reciprocal tariffs on us because the tariffs we're placing on them aren't, reciprocal to them. So if
Mhm.
they place tariffs back on us, that then disincentivizes our businesses from being able to sell in countries around the world because the consumers in those countries will have a higher cost for the American produced goods. So we'll lose out on so many different industries that rely on exporting. Like farmers, for example, they export their agricultural products, like, for example, soybeans or corn, to countries around the world. And that's a huge basis of their market. And if you are going to go after that by tariffing, those countries and then they tariff us, that's going to harm farmers in this country. And then, there's going to be like 30% of farms that go out. right? Because like a huge percentage of their market, because their agricultural products come from countries around the world. And also you got rid of it in terms of US aid. Um, so like there's a few things that the Trump administration has done to make it worse off in terms of trade that will actually harm a bunch of industries in the United States. So like if you say from a net basis, will it actually increase jobs? We don't even have good reason to believe that.
I do feel that, again, the way we view business and trade globally is going to change significantly over the next 5 to 10 years. And a lot of what Trump is doing, yes, it can be a bit uncertain as to what the short term looks like. But a lot of this is under the guise that as AI technology builds the blockchain and we turn to a more crypto friendly environment globally, Parker, everybody is going to become bankable in the globe when it comes to cryptocurrency. Servers will be on the blockchain, and there's multiple projects that are being invested in right now where the average
I
individual around the world, yep.
I just want to ask you, how is crypto going to actually be a predominant thing if governments don't have an incentive to allow for there to be less control over currency? They have an incentive for control over currency. So if there's any type of crypto, it's not going to be decentralized. It's going to be totally centralized currency. And if you go on to like crypto and you think crypto is going to get rid of the national debt, I don't see any actual like plan for that, fiscally speaking. We're talking about $35 trillion. $35 trillion in real terms doesn't just come out of nowhere, and an increase in the valuation of a particular coin isn't going to actually like net increase how much, in a real sense, money we have. You would just have to devalue the US dollar for that to be the case. Because think about it this way. If you're putting more of our capital into crypto and less of our capital in the US dollar, doesn't that lower the demand on the US dollar? So the way that you're actually getting rid of the debt is by devaluing the US currency? Are people who have money in US currency going to be happy about that?
I don't. I agree with you on that. I don't know if I necessarily agree with Russia's assessment as to how crypto is going to replace the national debt. I'm more, and you're right. If more of our economy and our assets go into crypto, that would put less demand on the dollar. However, I feel like in the next 5 to 10 years, everything is going to be transferred of value in a smart contract and can be done outside of the government control. And therefore, that is, in theory, a way to have this sort of globalist impact with everybody in the world to where governments can't control that. Now, what happened with Trump, and when he was going through all his indictments, he couldn't even access his money, and he couldn't pay his attorneys, and banks were refusing to do business with him on their properties, and he paid a lot of what he needed to get done through crypto, through Bitcoin and the Ethereum matrix. So I think that he sees it as a way for power back to the people, and therefore a lot of the legislation over the next couple of years are very pro crypto. They're very pro blockchain, and
So let me get in here. I don't think that his policy, if we especially look at a general sense, is pro the everyday average American. And I don't think this crypto policy is that. Sure, there could be crypto policy that would be beneficial to the average American. I don't think Trump's the one to do it, especially because let's go back to what we were doing with the tariffs. What is he doing with the tariffs? He's replacing a progressive tax structure, income tax, with a regressive tax structure, tariffs, because people who are lower income spend a greater proportion of their income on consumer goods. So if you are wanting to be free market, why would you prefer a system that, funds that the governmental structure through a regressive tax on low and middle income individuals to a disproportionate degree, rather than a tax on the wealthiest Americans that already have so much, right? Like, I mean, we would prefer the tax burden be placed on the rich rather than be placed on the working class, right?
I mean, that's partially in how the taxes are currently set up. I mean, anybody making under $50,000 is really not paying any taxes. And when you get over 400,000, you're paying 30, 40% of your wages. Now, I do agree that the corporate tax at 21% going lower is helpful because you want to incentivize reinvestment in their own businesses. You look globally, Parker, and the one thing, like, I've lived all over the world, and you get into some of these more progressive countries and they talk about how everything is great, grand, and wonderful. but there's not necessarily this free market and capitalist drive.
There actually
People
is.
hit.
That's just not true. I'm sorry. I have to cut you off here because if you look at
Oh yeah.
the economic freedom index, the Scandinavian countries that you would be pointing to, they actually have freer markets than what we have here in the United States. And then if you want to
Do you
incentivize
feel
reinvestment, you do that to a greater extent by having a top marginal tax rate that's higher. Because if the top marginal tax rate is higher, it creates a greater incentive from a business like employer perspective to do a reinvestment into the firm. Because when you do a reinvestment into the firm, it's a tax write-off. And what do you save in terms of a tax write-off? You save whatever your top marginal tax rate is because you would have otherwise paid that in taxes because it would have counted as income.
in the form of pass-through taxation, I agree with that. But now when you get into a C corp, it's double taxation. So they're paying 21% on their income, and then they have to pass through to their own personal tax. So in essence, it can be 60, 65% all in. But going back to the heart of it, if you look at the pulse of where creation and ideas are coming globally, a lot of that occurs in the US. Because as a free market capitalist structure, we incentivize people to keep building and building and building. If we get to a point where we say, hey, you've got enough, we're just going to increase your taxes more and more and more. Well, look what happened, after the war. When taxes were 90%?
Top marginal. That wasn't the
Top
effective tax
marginal.
rate.
I mean, you had significant stalling occur because why would you continue to increase?
I'm sorry, that's just not true. That was like a very, very high level of growth period for the United States GDP.
Well, if you take out the amount of baby boomers in relation to,
So you're saying increasing population is going to be beneficial to the GDP?
absolutely.
Sounds like we should have
you
more
got
immigration.
Well, I agree in the fact that we need to have more people in the U.S., but I would also agree in the fact that if they're going to come to the U.S., that they should at least respect the fact that this is America and this is the United States of America, and not send that money back to their home country.
I don't
I
think
mean,
that's
it's.
disrespecting. I mean, like just sending money to a different country isn't disrespecting. They made that money. They can choose to do what they want with that money, right?
Have you ever been to Ottawa, Canada?
Wait, is it a free market? I thought you wanted a free market. A free market would be that they can do whatever they want with their money.
I think that if you come into a country, I mean, we have one of the least strict immigration policies in the world. I mean, there's other countries that will you for coming into their country illegally.
Yeah, and that's
Now, I
obviously
don't
not the
agree with
standard
that
that we
either.
want to use for determining.
No, no, God no, God no. But I mean, you got to
And by the way,
realize
could you let me know which country?
Um, go with what is Poland right now? I mean, just I don't want to say like North Korea or something crazy, but what is Poland's immigration policy? I mean, what happens when you go to
I don't think
Warsaw?
I don't think you get in Poland if you come in
No,
undocumented.
I don't think it's in Poland. I mean, you might. Let me think here. You could go with. I wonder what Bulgaria is. Jakarta, Java. Anyways, total segue. I could chat with you about anything. I love it because, but I did want to hit one more piece, and then the abortion piece.
I'm kind of confused what we were just talking about.
Well,
I'm
no, I'm
confused how
good.
we got to that point.
Pre-1965, 80% of immigrants came from from first world countries. Post-1965, 85% of immigrants come from third world countries. When you think about the United States as a whole, I mean, are you adding to the potential growth of the economy, or
Yes.
are you potentially adding to the poverty state?
Oh, okay. There's no evidence that immigration leads to greater levels of poverty. If anything, immigration will actually lead to lower levels of poverty in the long run, especially because we won't have insolvency of Social Security and Medicare, which is likely to occur if we don't have immigration, because we won't have the necessary levels of tax revenue in order to be able to fund these programs, which will then lead to greater levels of poverty, especially in our elders, because it is the case that they rely on these programs in order to be able to not be in poverty. And since they've been implemented, it's heavily reduced poverty in this country. So if anything, immigration is a necessary element of reducing poverty in this country. And the idea that immigrants coming to the country are going to cause like there to be like a greater level of poverty is definitely not based in any facts or reality.